Hello and welcome to the Be Glad movement. My name's Pollyanna and I'm on a mission to bring you as many stories as possible of good coming out of bad and reasons to be glad. And this morning, although it's the afternoon in the UK, over in Philadelphia it's the morning. So this morning I am joined by Carrie Creed. And I am not even going to attempt to say the names of the syndrome and the things that Carrie has been through. I'm going to literally just say, let Carrie talk about it. So Carrie, say hi to everybody.
Hi everyone. Polly, thank you so much for having me on your Be Glad movement. It's so dear and near to my heart with everything I've gone through.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much for asking to be on. It's such an honor when people reach out and want to share their stories, because I say this all the time, but I really do believe your story and your voice has the ability to help someone in their time of need. So I'm going to literally just get out of the way and let you tell us all about what happened to you. And yeah, so over to you.
Well, thank you so much. As you know from our prior conversation, my whole life story is very unique. And I truly attribute the mental ability of positive thinking while you're going through challenges to get you through these difficult times. To take you back, 18 years ago when I was 20 years old, I had a major surgery on my leg. I was born with a genetic condition called Ehlers Danlos Syndrome. And that syndrome has 13 different characteristics within it. I have the most common, I guess is a good thing, but it's the hypermobility aspect. So I'm very flexible. My ligaments and tendons are basically very stretched out, and my joints sublux and dislocate very easy. So think of a contortionist, think of a gymnast, think of Cirque du Soleil, doing all those crazy acrobats and different flexible tricks. I can pretty much do all of those. They were party tricks. Now, not so much. They became very painful, and the syndrome became a very painful condition while growing up through childhood and still to this day.
Right.
What had happened was the ligament in my leg had stretched out, and it re-rotated the way I walked. And all of a sudden, instead of my knees pointing straight, so if your feet are parallel and they're right in front of you, if you're standing up, your kneecaps point forward. Well, my right kneecap pointed completely to the left, and when my knee bent, it bent behind my left leg, but my feet stayed parallel. So I know that is so hard to even picture, and thankfully I actually have a video of this that maybe you can share at some point. But the doctors, after a surgery had failed when I was in high school, once in college, I had to complete a double rotational osteotomy, which means these orthopedic surgeons, which were amazingly talented and I'm so grateful for, literally took a saw and sawed my femur, my thigh bone apart, and sawed my tibia and fibula apart, which is the lower part of your leg, and rotated my leg in opposite directions and inserted 12 rods in my leg to keep my leg apart.
Oh my goodness, that sounds horrific.
It was absolutely horrific. I ended up having numerous complications. I was in the hospital in Philadelphia for 73 days.
Wow.
I had contracted a very serious infection after the surgery, and I actually had one of the rods fall out, and they had to repair that and go back in. The challenging part with this type of break, it's not like when you have a cast on your arm or your leg and it just heals naturally. You have to walk. So you have to have the bones compressed together for the cells to calcify for them to heal, because of the cut is so straight through. Right. So walking was the only way to heal my leg. And so I endured multiple hours of physical therapy a day, walking on my leg with these 12 rods with it broken in many parts.
Oh my goodness. Well, that just sounds so painful and it's scary from a medical point of view as well, because all those, I mean, you obviously know it all inside out, but the terminology that you just sort of threw at me was a bit like, wow, that all sounds very technical and high-tech medicine. So I imagine that was probably quite scary, because how old did you say you were? 20? So you'd already
I was 20 years old at that time. It was after my freshman year in college. And at that point, when you're 20, your biggest concerns are, when am I getting back to school? Well, how will I see my friends? You're not necessarily thinking too much about, finances. I'm on my parents' health care still. I'm living at home, I'm, going to school. You don't have the normal cares you do as a quote unquote adult. So it was a different mental experience than what happened most recently, but I'll continue to take you down the path with my leg first. So I was discharged after 73 days, basically because being inpatient wasn't providing any more benefits. And they sent me home a little bit before Thanksgiving, which is in November. And I remained in home for 6 months. And I was in a hospital bed in my 2-bedroom apartment with my mom in the living room. And at that point, it took 2 people to get me out of bed. I had blew out both of my shoulders rehabbing because I was on a walker and I was learning how to walk on parallel bars. And as you can imagine, you take a lot of the weight of your body on your shoulders to not put that weight on your broken leg. And because of my condition, I ended up blowing out both of my shoulders.
Ooh.
So I then had 2 shoulder braces that I needed to wear, and I was no longer to use the support of my arms ever. So think about if you're trying to get out of bed and you push down on the mattress to go, to go like this. I couldn't do that anymore. My shoulders would dislocate. So someone would literally need to be behind me and grab underneath my arms, and someone would have to hold my leg. Now, I lived at home with my mom, who was a single parent. So we didn't have 2 people at the house.
No.
So I had to wait till physical therapy or a nurse came throughout the day, and my father came down in the evenings to do physical therapy with me. So I had physical therapy 3 times a day. And all it was walking back and forth in my living room. And we would do a dance. The person, the physical therapist or my nurse or my dad would hold the belt that I had to wear around my waist. And that was to, if I fell, they would grab me by the belt. But we would literally almost do a dance where they'd walk backwards, I'd walk forward. And we'd have to really focus on making sure our legs were always in sync. Because if my leg hit theirs, or if the pins that stuck out of my leg 12 inches hit theirs, it was excruciating.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I can imagine. Crikey. So high tension for all of you, the person, be it your mum, dad, or the physio, trying to support you, and it must be quite frightening thinking if I fall and I've got all this gubbins around me that might poke me, or wow, I can't even begin to imagine how that must have felt, especially the helplessness of being stuck in bed until there were more hands there to help you.
Yeah, and that was what was most challenging. I did find at that time, your mental capabilities and what you choose to focus on is what heals you or hurts you. So I choose to have it help me and heal me. And I chose to control what I was able to control. Because let's face it, I was told I was going to miss 1 semester of school. At that time, I was in nursing school to help others. And I was supposed to miss 1 semester. I ended up missing 2 years. Wow. So I needed to control what I could. And so what I could control in my little hospital bed was, as silly as it sounds, the way my stuffed animals were lined up before I went to bed, the order of my blankets that went over me, and the quotes, the motivational and positive quotes that I read before I went to bed, and the music I listened to. And I chose to do certain things every day, almost a little bit of OCD, but I chose to do that because that's what I was able to control, and that's what gave me the positive mindset to wake up the next day with a smile. We did things, when I was on a ton of pain medicine to stay out of pain. And my mom had done the best she can do, which was incredible, to try to make me smile throughout the day. She brought down drawers from my bedroom that was upstairs, and we would clean out my sock drawer and my t-shirt drawer, and we'd be like, okay, you can't go to your bedroom for spring cleaning, but let me bring it to you. My friends would visit and we would take funny pictures, and, we would make the best of it. It was all about trying to stay out of pain as much as possible, and also trying to, feel normal as a 20-year-old woman who couldn't go to the bathroom and couldn't take a shower. I had bedpans and bed baths for over 13 months.
Wow.
So, losing privacy, losing that ability to be independent was really challenging. But to have the support system that I had is what really got me through it.
Amazing. Yeah. Your mum, I salute your mum for all that. Obviously, she's going to do it because she loves you, but we don't sort of always appreciate our parents until we're older ourselves, do we?
Oh, so true. Until I became a mom myself, I didn't realize what it's like to have a child who's going through a challenge and going through pain. It's unbelievable. In the hospital, she actually slept in a chair for the 73 days and never left my side.
Oh, love her. Wow. Wow, that's real dedication. Oh, and what was it like when you finally got to go back to college? Did you? I mean, obviously, all your other friends that you'd made in that first year had moved on. So, did you kind of have to start all over again?
I did. I actually had to move and change universities. So I had lived in northeastern Pennsylvania, about 2 hours from Philadelphia at that time, and I was going to the University of Scranton, and I was a nursing student. The doctors had advised me not to go into nursing. They said it would be too physical of a career, moving patients, doing 12-hour shifts. And they, looking back on it, they were right. They actually had also said I needed to move to Philadelphia after my surgery, because what had happened was, once I was home for the 6 months, my body actually was starting to reject the metal in my leg, and my infection was worsening. And my leg actually wasn't healing at all. I had a complete non-union. So after a 6 months time frame, 6, 7, 8 month time frame, my leg was only 20% healed. And in May, they had to rush me back to the hospital, so a 2-hour ambulance ride, and they had to remove the pins. And at that point, they had said, Carrie, I don't know what's going to happen. Your leg can shatter. We're removing 12 pins in a leg that's been sawed in half in multiple locations. You might wake up with new pins. You brought a brace that somebody tried to fit you. We're going to try to see if that works. We might have to amputate. Like, we don't know what is going to happen. And going into that surgery, I remember the knot that was in my stomach, but I was determined to go into that with a positive mindset. I think at 20, I did the best I could. I remember kind of freaking out a little bit in pre-op, but that was a very, very scary moment. And thankfully, one of the only things that went to plan was they were able to save my leg. It didn't shatter. I didn't need to get more pins in. The brace that I had brought that somebody had fit me, since the fitting was almost impossible to do, did not even come close to fitting. So they did have to fit me for another leg when I was under general anesthesia, fit me for another cast, I mean. And in 24, 48 hours, that was airlifted to the hospital. And I was able to now start to learn to walk with this new robo cast, robo brace that went all the way up my leg, with metal up my side, and a big part that was around my, my whole chest.
Gosh, wow, my goodness. I can't even begin to imagine how frightening that must have been for you and your parents, to lose a limb. It's a massive life-changing situation, isn't it? And thank goodness you got to keep your limbs, so that's brilliant. And I'm just always in awe and marvel at modern technology and medicine. It's incredible. So what a blessing that they managed to save your leg.
Thank goodness. I am so grateful for so many things that I have gone through, and what the doctors and nurses and all of the physical therapists that had helped me. All I wanted to do was to be able to walk down the aisle someday. And that was something that I really visualized when I was 20, to really, am I going to be able to do that in the way that I've always envisioned that as a little girl? It seems like such a simple thing, but when you start getting scared about how your life could potentially change if you don't have a leg, that is the one thing that I really tried to visualize. So, the great part of the story is I went on to learn how to walk again. And, when I was discharged from the hospital after my brace, my mom and I lived at the Philadelphia Ronald McDonald house for many, many months, for 5.5 months. And I am so overly grateful for them. They allowed us to stay there, be a part of their community. And the reason why I had to stay there is because, again, we lived 2 hours from that location. And I was in a wheelchair with my brace, and I had to do multiple hours a day of physical therapy, outpatient, at a local hospital, 5 days a week. So a wheelchair van picked me up in the morning, and I spent pretty much the whole day at the University of Pennsylvania's outpatient physical therapy center to learn how to walk, to get my shoulders back, to be able to use my arms. And I slowly started to, get rid of parts of the brace. After a few months, they were able to remove the part that was around my chest. And, they slowly were able to unlock the part around my knee to help me start to bend my leg. I hadn't bent my leg in over a year.
Wow.
And so just that, just the thought of trying to bend something, think of how stiff we are in the morning after we just sleep with our arm in a weird spot. Could you imagine not moving for a whole year? And the hard part was they couldn't force it to bend because, again, my leg still wasn't healed. And so any pressure they would put on it, or any type of aggressive therapy, would actually put pressure on the wrong spot and could start me back from scratch. So it was very gradual, very slow physical therapy. But luckily, the only thing that silver lining was that the Ehlers Danlos that I have that allows me to be extra flexible gave me basically my mobility back.
Wonderful.
I have over probably 95% of use back of my leg. There's certain positions I can't sit in, crisscross applesauce, like they say in school, is difficult for me. Certain running is still a challenge. So there's certain twisting positions because of the way my leg was rotated that is hard. But otherwise, I have my leg and I have my life, and I'm extremely, extremely grateful to be glad.
Amazing. And that's so cool that you've got all of your mobility back, essentially. You've already explained slight, bits and pieces that make it are more difficult for you, but in general, you're leading a pretty normal, happy, flexible lifestyle. So that's awesome, really great. And I just wanted to actually go back to what you said about the Ronald McDonald House, because I only learnt about these because my cousin's little girl was very poorly and they had to stay in one, and I hadn't known that they existed before then, but I think they are absolutely amazing. So full respect to McDonald's, because when I was growing up and we used to nip into McDonald's and put our change in those boxes at the front, I didn't even really think about where that money was going. But there, for those of you who don't know, there are these houses right near hospitals that or flats and whatnot that you can stay in, and they certainly for my cousin, they had food and hairdryers and all the things you could think you possibly need to be able to stay and be with your loved ones. So they're very, very cool.
Yeah, it's an incredible community, and volunteers come in every day to make dinner for you. And I mean, I still, 18 years later, still stay in touch with families who are there with me during that time.
Oh, lovely.
They're from all over the world. We still send Christmas cards to about 6 families. So it's just a really special connection you make with people. And even just saying that, I kind of got the chills. I mean, I've done a lot of charity work for them and promoting, and I want to continue to do that because they really allowed us to be able to get back on our feet, and they do it in a way that really helps people in such a variety of ways.
Wonderful, wonderful. So where did life take you next? You went back to uni, and what happened?
Yep. I went back to university and I graduated. I changed my school. I had to change my major. I graduated and I went on to a very successful sales career. And I've been in sales for 13 years. And I've loved every minute of it. And I'm still currently in sales in the fintech world. And, I've been really thinking about, writing a book and talking about my experience with my leg. And, life gets busy. I met my husband and we got married, and, we had our first child in 2015. And we had a little baby boy named Tristan, and it was wonderful. My pregnancy was high risk because of the Ehlers Danlos. So I was monitored very closely and I had multiple ultrasounds, but everything was great. And he ended up being breech, which means instead of his head being down, his feet were down. So I had to have a cesarean, which was actually okay. There was a large debate if I should have a traditional delivery or not. If I had an epidural, they were nervous that if the nurses had pulled my legs back, that I wouldn't be able to feel, that they would dislocate. And I'm very flexible, so my legs can go all the way back. My feet can go behind my head. So if they're pushing and pushing, and I couldn't feel it, there was a big fear of that being very dangerous for me throughout delivery. And so we weighed the pros and cons of regular delivery versus cesarean. And surgery for me is, I have a very hard, much longer recovery. So that's not a great option either. So it was like the lesser of two evils. But God made the decision up for us, and he had Tristan be breech. So we didn't have to make that choice. And, I thought that was a really great blessing in disguise. And I had a great delivery, and they delivered him at 38 weeks just to ensure that I wouldn't go into labor ahead of time. And he's been the joy of our life ever since. Oh. And when he was about 2.5, my husband and I decided to try to have another baby, and we were blessed to get pregnant very fast. And again, high risk pregnancy, but everything was fine. And at 20 weeks pregnant, I had my normal anatomy scan, which everyone really does throughout that time period. They count the fingers and the toes, and they check to make sure there's 4 chambers in the heart, and that all the organs are there. And you can typically find out the sex of the baby at that time. Well, during that, I had already known I was carrying a daughter since I was considered a geriatric pregnancy because I was over 35. It's hilarious that they call you a geriatric woman when you're 35 years old being pregnant. But at that age, you have to have other testing. So I found out weeks prior that we were having a girl, which I was thrilled with. But during that 20-week ultrasound, I learned that I had the condition called Placenta Previa. And placenta previa is where your placenta in your uterus is lower, and it's covering either your entire cervix or a part of it. And the cervix is where your baby comes out through to be delivered. So if that opening is covered, you're obviously not able to deliver your baby in a normal fashion, and you'd have to have a cesarean. Mm-hmm. So I was told that, and I thought to myself, okay, I mean, I was most likely going to have a C-section cesarean again. But my doctor told me that I had an increased chance of bleeding because of the placenta previa being near my cervix. And because of another health condition I have with a blood clotting disorder called factor V, I had been on blood thinners throughout pregnancy. So I had to give myself, or I should say my husband, my wonderful husband had to give me daily shots in my stomach of blood thinners. So since I had a higher chance of bleeding in the first place and on blood thinners, I was at a high risk of hemorrhaging at any moment. So the doctor shared with me if I ever bled to make sure I call 911 immediately. And after a very busy December of 2017 of business travel, I was all over the country doing my thing, and was then put on a travel ban right before Christmas. And we had Christmas as a family, and it was wonderful. And on January 5th, 2018, I went for another ultrasound. And I should say I was supposed to go for another ultrasound, but that was canceled. And I ran an errand on my lunch hour, and I ended up hemorrhaging. And I was in a store, and I felt a gush. And I knew that gush was not a good gush. And I asked to go to the bathroom, and when I did, there was blood everywhere, and my heart just sank. At 25 weeks, I was terrified, but I stayed exceptionally calm because I knew I only had a couple minutes if something worse was going to happen. And so I called 911, and I told them my name, my medical conditions, how many weeks pregnant I was, why I was bleeding, where I needed to go, what my doctors had said, so everything. So in case I had passed out, they would know what was happening. Luckily, the bleeding slowed, and so I never passed out, but I did have to get on the floor and call the woman out front, and she was more terrified than me. She kind of panicked. And I called my husband and told him to meet me at the hospital. And we got to the hospital, and the baby was fine. My daughter had no idea what was happening. The stress test was fine. She was still kicking around. And but I knew I couldn't stay at that hospital because they did not have a level 3 NICU. And that means that they can take care of a baby who was born under a certain amount of weeks.
Right.
So the hospital they took me to had a NICU that only can take care of babies at 32 weeks and above. And so I needed to be at a level 3 NICU, and I wasn't able to be initially transferred there because the ambulance had to take me to the closest hospital to try to save me in case I got worse. But I did transfer to another hospital, and I never left. I was there for 65 days on complete bed rest.
Oh my goodness, wow. That's quite something, having spent so much time in hospital when you were younger. Obviously it was something that you were used to, but you know what I mean, you've done it before, you're a bit of a veteran. But no one wants to be stuck in hospital. No, but well, I mean, as we're filming this, the coronavirus is happening and we're all stuck at home, but nobody wants to be stuck in one place for that long. So, oh my goodness. And how did you feel about that? Did they tell you straight away, or was it just a case of, did they say, oh, you're going to definitely have to be here until the baby's born? Or did they say, oh, let's just see how this week goes, let's see how the next week goes? And how did that build up for you?
You're exactly right. And it's interesting to see what's going on now, even in the press, and how they're telling people about the quarantine and how schools are closing for just a week or two and then they're being extended. The doctors believed when I first was checked in that I wasn't going anywhere. But they told me you have to not be bleeding for 24 hours to go home. And I bled on and off for 4 days. And then once I got to the 4th day, they said you have to be, not bleeding for a week to go home. And so they carried me another week. And it was right around that week point that I very directly asked my OB doctor, I said, I'm not going anywhere, am I? And she looked at me and she said, no, you're not. We just, couldn't tell you that when you checked in because we weren't sure of how your reaction would be. And some people would flip out. So we needed to ease you into the idea of staying here. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening now. We're all being eased into the idea of working from home, being at home with our kids, school being closed, not being able to leave. We're all getting used to bits and pieces of it, and then it's being extended.
Right. Wow. It's interesting. I never thought you were actually going to, it didn't occur to me at all that you were going to say that as a tactic that they use, but it's quite a clever one, really. It makes sense because, yeah, if you hit someone with the information that they are not going until that baby's born, it is quite a massive thing to digest, but it by doing it the way they did, it gave you that time to get used to your surroundings and feel more comfortable with the idea. Wow, but it's still a really long time. And how did you feel during that time? Were you quite comfortable being there? And was it a nice place to be? Or were you like, get me home?
Oh, I was scared. I was in a very, very, very small room that literally just fit my bed and a chair. It was very, very small. There was a large window, but I decided that I was going to decorate that room better than any room was ever decorated. I ordered a custom sign that said, "Keep on cooking, baby sister." So that, keep her inside is a saying we say. My son would call her baby sister because we didn't have a name yet. And I had went online and got a ton of motivational positive quotes, and I sent them to my husband to print out to bring down to me. And I hung up all of my son's artwork and all my ultrasound pictures, and my friends and family, sent me so many wonderful gifts and flowers. And I decorated that room. It was more decorated than my dorm room when I went to school. It was pretty awesome. I mean, I had staff coming in saying, "I've heard about room, 2001. This is unbelievable. Can I come in and see it?" So it just became this cheery space that I had to do to keep my mind off of the fact that I was in the hospital.
Right.
And the other thing that I did that I really feel was extremely helpful is I kept a routine. I try to make things as normal as possible in a time that I had no control. I mean, I could have bled again at any moment. And if I did, I had a huge chance of delivering my daughter, because every time you would bleed, it would put her, or it's proven to, put your baby at some distress. And so then they'd have to weigh the ups and downs and the pros and cons of delivering or not. So keeping a mental ability to be calm and focus is extremely important. And so what I decided to do was keep as much normalcy as possible. And I worked. I continued to work full time throughout that whole hospital stay. I ended up, crushing my sales quota in just a few weeks and really closing a very large deal, which was amazing. And I scheduled different things throughout the day. I scheduled one visitor, and then baby monitoring, and then a doctor to come in, and then a conference call, and then lunch. And then I did the same thing again in the afternoon. And what I found is that gave me structure. I found that having more than 2 visitors a day was too much. It was too much of a mental drain on me. And so it didn't help me anymore. And so I only had two people come. And I found that, having more than, 3 or 4 conference calls was too much. But I also learned that I had control of my day. And as much as the doctors thought it was silly that I only let them come in to see me at certain time slots, they knew I was working, and they respected that. And they knew that's what was helping me get through this really challenging situation.
That's amazing. Wow, you're like Wonder Woman pulling all of that off.
No, hardly, please. Don't give me that much credit.
I think that's great, though. I think, like when you were talking about the leg operation, you kept structure by controlling the things that you could control. And now, as an older woman and a mum already, I think you mentioned that you're a geriatric mother. I was a geriatric mother when my son was born as well. I love that term. It's just hilarious. But I think you do get to a certain age where you're like, okay, I know what I want, and this is how it's going to be. Mm-hmm. But I guess the medical system over there is a lot different to what it is here in the UK. And I can't even begin to imagine being able to tell the doctors when they could or couldn't come in. So that's absolutely fantastic that you were able to take control in that manner. So full credit to you for that. That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's all about how you do it, obviously, too. And they knew how challenging the situation was for me. And once I was moved up to the maternity floor and was told I was staying there, there was another woman that was there that had only been there for a few weeks. And she had checked herself out against medical guidance the day after I arrived. She just couldn't handle it. She couldn't handle being cooped up. She couldn't handle missing her other child at home. She just couldn't handle it. And she checked herself out. And so the doctors knew that this was a really challenging thing, a really challenging situation on the mental ability of a person. You know, it was very different than my leg surgery. My friends had said, similar to what you said, you have experience in this. You've been on bed rest before. You got this, girl. You got this. And as much as I would say, oh, I've got it, but this is nothing like my leg surgery. You know, I'm a successful woman. I have a career. I'm in charge of finance, you know, family finances. I have a husband who has a successful career. I have a son at home. And I'm pregnant with our unborn daughter. Like the pressures, the stresses, the anxiety was so far different than what it was when I was 20. And so it really tested your mental ability. You know, I wasn't in pain. I wasn't worried about, you know, losing a leg. I wasn't in pain with having another surgery. I was worried about dying. I was worried about, you know, something impacting me for the rest of my life. At any moment, I could have bled and hemorrhaged. And if I wasn't, you know, in the OR in a certain amount of time, and I'm talking like seconds under a minute, I would bleed to death. And it would be really hard to save me, and if they were able to do that and I had a massive blood transfusion, that could affect me. You know, there's other, you know, side effects from that could affect our family for the rest of our life. So it was a very high intense, traumatic experience that I had to not focus on. So it was, you know, I was really using my wall of motivation with all my quotes, and, you know, the warmness of the room around me. I listened to a lot of Nora Jones and Enya to calm me throughout the day. And I had, you know, the Luminaire candles that look real, but they're just battery operated. And it was a very serene room that I created to try to keep calm. And, you know, working, as strange as that sounded, kept me calm. You know, people had said, oh, you know, Netflix, binge watch shows, watch movies, read some books. I couldn't do that because that tricked my mind. That told me if I had time to do that, something was wrong.
Yeah, I think, you know, what you were saying about going to work, using your mind to concentrate on the practicalities of being at work. So many of us, I think I probably would be as well, would be like, oh yeah, you know, this is the perfect excuse not to have to go to work. But actually, under the circumstances, having that distraction probably helped you through, because you can sit and watch Netflix, but your mind is still working, but usually in a negative way. You can start thinking about all the things that could potentially go wrong. So if you're concentrating on your clients and your conference calls and that kind of thing, you're not then allowing your mind to go down any negative downward spirals. So that's, you know, having that foresight was actually quite a cool thing, because so many people be like, dude, I'm not going back to work. I need to concentrate on looking after me. But you actually knew that was the way to look after you, which is really cool.
It was, you're exactly 100% right. It was the way that I needed to look after myself. And I also said, I don't take maternity until my baby comes. So I didn't want my maternity leave to start before my baby arrived. And I, you know, didn't want to lose that time after. And, you know, that was a big concern for me too. And, you know, I didn't wrap things up at work the way I needed to before I went out. And I'm very conscientious with that. And I couldn't have just stepped away at that point on January 5th. Things weren't tied up in a pretty bow as I needed it to be before I stepped away. I needed to finish deals. I needed to feel fulfilled, and I needed to help my clients. And that's what helped me too. So you said it exactly right. I even a couple times slipped on conference calls saying I was in my hotel room instead of my hospital room. I truly tried to say like I was remote working, because I travel for business a good amount, and I wanted to make it feel like I'm just remote working. You know, I'm in a hotel room and I'm, you know, working remotely. So I try to create that normalcy. And I think what helped me too is there was an end line. There was an end in sight. My leg surgery, there wasn't. I had no idea how long it was going to go on for. Thinking it was only going to be one semester of school helped me in the beginning. But when it continued past the year, that's where it got challenging. This situation had an end date. Once my condition worsened in the hospital after I was there for 3 weeks, the Placenta Previa turned into Placenta Accreta and then Placenta Increta. And what that means is my placenta then decided to dig itself in my uterus and grow inside of it. And that's when things for me got real and got really dangerous about the possibility of me dying and hemorrhaging. And that's when they shared with me that I wouldn't be able to carry my daughter past 34 weeks. So prior to that, they were going to let me carry her to about 37 weeks, maybe 38 if I like pushed a little bit. But as soon as I got that diagnosis of placenta accreta, I A, wasn't going anywhere, and B, couldn't carry her past March 6th. So her original due date was April 15th. She was supposed to be my April baby, and but they, moved it back to March 6th. And once I had that date, there was no turning back. I had my handmade calendar on the wall, and I would cross off the days I was in the hospital every day, and I had a big red circle around March 6th. And I would visualize that day multiple times throughout the day. And any doctor that tried to tell me the chances of me getting there was very slim, and it probably wouldn't happen, and to prepare for it not happening, I would say, I'm sorry, but you can turn around and you can leave, because I'm getting to March 6th. And that was my attitude the entire time.
Amazing. And in that time, did you cut back on work at all once you had the new diagnosis, or it carried on the same? You kept your routine?
It carried on the same. It wasn't, I did notice that the amount of hours I had to work, it's interesting, when you're on complete bed rest, for the first 5 weeks, I wasn't even allowed to leave my hospital room. I could get up to go to the bathroom, but that was it. And when your body slows down that much, so does your brain. And it was taking me a lot longer to formulate emails and write proposals. And so my 8-hour workday turned out to be like an 11-hour workday in some cases. I wasn't, cold calling throughout that time and, prospecting, but I was working on closing the deals at my pipeline and taking care of clients' needs at that moment. So I continued to do that up until 3 days, actually up until 2 days before I delivered. Only thing I did, it was interesting. So when no one told me I'd get to March 6th, I got to March 6th, and it was a week before March 6th that I said to myself, okay, I'm really close. I haven't used this time to my advantage. I probably should have done a couple projects. I probably should have, worked on some family photo albums or read a book or did something for myself throughout this time. But mentally I couldn't, but I allowed myself the week before March 6th to work on a couple photo albums online and to do a couple things I needed to do in my spare time. And when I got to March 5th, the day before, it was very funny. I said to myself, gosh, I should have started all that like a lot earlier, because I could have got a lot of stuff done. But I couldn't, and mentally I couldn't, and that's what saved me. And it's funny because now we're all in quarantine and we're all trying to work from home and all of that. And I hear some friends and family saying, oh, I'm going to use this time, in the nights and the mornings and my lunch hour to clean out the closet and, purge some of my kids' toys. And it'll be really interesting when this is all over, because let's face it, it'll be all over soon enough. Will we have got those jobs done? Will we have completed those goals? Half of us will and half of us won't, because we don't ever want to take that first action because we're afraid, because we think we have more time. We think we'll do it next week. We think we'll do it next week. And then soon this is going to be over and we're all going to return to the office and we're going to say, wow, I wasted a lot of time where I could have been really productive.
Yeah, you're right. You're so right. It's always tomorrow, 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 isn't it? You think you're going to have all the time in the world to get something done, but unless you start, it just stays on that back burner.
Exactly. So, long story short, I hit my goal and I delivered my beautiful baby daughter, Tenley, on March 6th. It was a controlled surgery where they had over 30 people in the OR. There was a multiple specialists there. I did have a blood transfusion because I did have some bleeding, which was expected, but the surgery went incredible. And I am so grateful to the fabulous doctors within Mainline Hospital who made me and my family whole again. And, I had to have a hysterectomy during the surgery, which was known prior. When you have placenta accreta, since your placenta grows into your uterus, the only way to remove your placenta is by having a hysterectomy, by removing your entire uterus.
Wow.
So that was very challenging. That was very difficult news that I received while in the hospital, obviously, many weeks before I delivered. Very emotional, very, very difficult diagnosis to know that, I wouldn't be able to have more children, and that a part of my body, a part of what makes me a woman, would be removed. And that was a very difficult a diagnosis to accept.
Of course, yeah, it must have been. Yeah, and Sorry, your daughter's name was Tenley, was it?
Henley, yes.
Tenley. And was she okay? She came out happy enough?
Yeah, she did. She was born at the 34 weeks. She was 5 pounds, 9 ounces, which is incredible. The one thing my placenta did was nourish her so much. My placenta was the size of it would be if I was having triplets. It was massive. And so it gave her wonderful nutrients. So she was actually a lot larger than she probably should have been at 34 weeks. She had to stay in the NICU for 18 days because her lungs were premature and she needed some time to, to get some help breathing and get some help eating. But she came home with us as a family on March 24th in 2018. It was actually 2 years ago yesterday, which was really exciting. And we were finally under one roof together, which was amazing. And to get through that experience and to pull through the positive mindset that I was able to learn from my leg surgery to get me through that experience, I'm starting to figure out what life's all about. If I didn't have my leg surgery prior, I'm not sure I would have been able to get through that experience with the success that I did.
Sure. Yeah, my goodness, it all adds up, doesn't it? It's funny how it is really funny how life sometimes just works out that way, and it's not until you're going through something that you can then, or more to the point, at the other side of a massive experience, that you can look back and say, okay, well, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have known this, or I wouldn't have been able to do that. And yeah, looking back, it's easier to connect the dots. But yeah, incredible. Gosh, you've been through so much.
Well, it's all for a reason, and I'm hoping my story can really, really help others. And what's interesting is when I had these two experiences and I pulled from the mindset and the positive thinking and all of that, I thought when I came home with my daughter after she was home that everything was all over and we can go back to living this wonderful life again. And that really wasn't the case, and that's what made me really want to share my story, because when I was 4 months postpartum, so that summer, I ended up having a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of sadness. I had a lot of connection issues with my daughter. Not having her come home with me after 65 days in the hospital and stay in the hospital really messed up my mind. It was almost feeling like I didn't have a baby and that something happened and I was just now leaving the hospital. And even though I returned every day to spend 8 hours, 10 hours with her in the NICU, it just didn't feel right. And it's really hard to explain that to somebody who may not have ever gone through it. And I had all this anger, and the doctors had said to me after I left the hospital, we really want to make sure that you go into some weekly therapy and that you speak to a therapist once a week, because you've been through a lot. And it's important to get those emotions out, and you're going to have a lot of feelings. And I said, okay, I'm willing to do that. I think that's important, and I would love to. So I did go to weekly therapy, and up until 4 months, I was quote unquote fine. I was doing my thing and, on maternity leave and making sure my daughter was okay and my son was good and I was happy to be home. And then all this anger came and all these triggers came. And, I'd see on Instagram a maternity, an ad for maternity clothes, or I'd see a newborn baby, or I'd see somebody announce they're pregnant. And I would be so resentful. And I was so angry that I would never have that again. And I'd never shop for maternity clothes and never have a baby kick in my stomach again. And all of the last experiences being pregnant was taken from me with being in the hospital. I had all this anger and I just didn't know why.
There's not only the element of, that being in the hospital was all about having a baby. It was all, you are only there for the sake of your daughter. And then to have to leave the hospital without her, there are people that that bring babies home and they find it hard to bond anyway, regardless. So yeah, you really did miss out on the enjoying people. You know what it's like, people want to touch your bump or guess whether it's a girl or a boy, and that complete strangers feel entitled to do that.
Totally.
So you kind of missed out on that really sort of big stage of walking around and people complimenting you and things like that. So you did miss out on a lot. And then to have done the thing that any mother would do, what is best for their child, staying put, not necessarily relaxing in the typical sense of the word, but looking after yourself in the hospital, to then suddenly you being discharged and little Tenley having to stay there, that's a massive shock to the system, I can only begin to imagine. So you were suffering with the anger and the resentment and, feeling like you were never going to have another child. A hysterectomy is so final.
So final.
Not surprised you felt anger and resentment. So what happened then? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, and thankfully I had and I still have a wonderful therapist who I work with, and she just happened to be trained in EMDR. And EMDR is a type of therapy. It's eye movement desensitization. And what it does is it basically heals your brain into healing. So it tricks it into reprocessing your trauma. And what it is, I almost viewed it as a little bit of like hypnosis, which I'm sure that is totally not the right way of describing it. But the way it was described to me is our brain all has, files in a filing cabinet. And when we go through trauma, and when trauma, you're not healed from it, that filing cap or that file sticks up in the filing cabinet and the door can't close. So until we heal that trauma and that file can go back down, then the door in the filing cabinet can close. So the trauma of my delivery basically had a file sticking up, and it wouldn't allow me to heal. And so we needed to relive that whole trauma. What's crazy about that whole experience is it brings up all other traumas in your life. And so I ended up talking through all other different things that has gone in my childhood that, maybe had bothered me that I didn't even know had bothered me. And so, once we got to the experience of the delivery and the hospital stay and the bleeding and all that, I was able to work through that, and I was able to heal and express my emotions and finally express how scared I was, because I really tried really hard throughout the hospital to ignore it and to push on and to act like nothing was wrong and to continue working and continue to be cheery. And people would say, you're still smiling, you're always smiling. And like, there's no alternative. There's so much to be grateful for. And at some point you have to crash. You have to come down, and coming down is okay. But while I was coming down, I thought I failed. And I remember being in therapy saying, I don't understand. Like, why did I fail? I'm the optimist. I'm the positive one. Like, how did I fail? And, my therapist, of course, said I didn't fail. But it took me a while for me to realize I didn't fail. That was just a part of my journey. If I failed, I would have stayed there, and I would have fallen into a deep depression, or I would have started abusing alcohol or drugs, or I would have, did something horrible to myself or something. That would have been, catastrophic. But to me, I rose above again, and I fought, and I pulled the positive out of this, and I reconnected with my daughter, and I, went back to work after I took a 6-month maternity leave, and I went back to work, and I got my confidence back. And today I'm, 2 years out. My daughter just had her 2nd birthday. And, I can say that I'm probably 95% fully healed and back to where I was prior, but I'm a better version of who I was prior because of what I've learned about myself and what I've learned throughout this entire experience.
We spend so much of our lives trying to avoid difficult situations and avoid pain and discomfort, but actually a lot of the time it is what makes us stronger in the long run. It makes us a better human, more self-aware, more aware of the people around us, and having more empathy for the people around us as well. So, wow, what an incredible story. It's just, you've been through a lot, and I'm so glad that you reached out and shared that. And that, looking back at, you've already sort of given so much great advice, but is there any specific advice that you would give somebody in those situations that you've been through?
I think my tips are similar to what I had said was, control what you can control. Today in this whole quarantine, we can't control if our stores are out of toilet paper. We can't control if our schools stay closed throughout the rest of the year. What we can control is that we're calm in our house in front of our children. We can control that we set up a workout routine for us, in our living room or our basement, or we go for a jog. We can control what we eat, so we don't gain, 10, 20 pounds. And when this whole thing is over, we all get really depressed because we don't look the same way and our clothes don't fit. So control the things we can control and focus on those. We can't control the stock market. Don't focus on that. Worrying about something doesn't make the situation change. It doesn't get you anywhere. It just causes your brain to focus on the negative, which then creates a negative emotion, which then makes us feel down, which then makes everyone around us feel down. So as much as it's, it sounds so cliche to be grateful, to be happy, be grateful and happy. I mean, we are all just being asked to be in our homes with our children. We're not asked to be in our bedrooms, or, our children are being taken away, and, there's food for us to get. And yes, there are horrible, horrible things happening in the world with the economy and with businesses closing and people contracting this virus. And there is many people going through horrific things right now that we're all praying for daily. But if you're not immediately impacted by that, if you and your family are not, and you are just trying to just live your life, be grateful. Be grateful. That's really all it is. And focus on that, and get yourself on a schedule, and try not to be in your jammies every day. You don't need to go crazy homeschooling with your kids, but try to do one or two things. Set small goals. Try to be grateful. Try to get on a schedule, and exercise and drink water and eat right. It sounds simple, but we'll all be much better if we do that throughout this time.
100%. And it's quite often the simple things that we overlook, isn't it? We think, oh, well, I'm just at home, so yeah, I will stay in my pajamas. And because your pajamas are stretchy, one more biscuit won't matter, and then all of a sudden you've got to put your workwear back on, and you can't zip it up. But it is so easy to sort of just think, right, okay, let's kick back and watch Netflix all day rather than exercise. And I'm guilty of doing that myself sometimes.
Me too. Yeah, I'm not perfect over here. I literally just did my first yoga class at home just yesterday. We've been on quarantine now for like over a week and a half. So give yourself time. And that's the other advice. Be gracious. Give yourself time and forgive yourself. We're all going through something that we've never had before. So no one's an expert here. No one's going to be able to be a super mom or a super employee right now. So be gracious. Give yourself some grace. But don't wait too long to be hard on yourself, to say, come on, snap out of it. Get up, get dressed, put clothes on, exercise. Don't wait too long to do that.
100%. 100%. Oh, Carrie, thank you so much for giving up your time this morning and sharing all of that with us. It's been really valuable to hear how you sort of, interestingly, it was my mum that installed the Be Glad movement ethos in me when I was tiny. She, as you know, she named me Pollyanna after the book and film Pollyanna. So I've grown up with the glad game and optimism. But was it your mum who also kind of gave you that positive outlook, or was it just being American? Because I think Americans are really quite positive in general.
The leg surgery that I went through when my mom was at my side, we both were each other's rocks. She'll say that I was her inspiration, and I'll say that she was my inspiration. And so we really fed off of each other with creating this positive attitude and just having hope that we would get through it. I think each of us is born with this trait inside of us. We're born with positivity and gratefulness. Just sometimes it's further down and it's harder to reach. And sometimes for some of us, I think it's more to the surface. And the type of person I am, I think it's always been more to the surface. I've overcome some other things throughout childhood, and I've always kind of persevered through them, and has been the one to say, we've got this, everyone, and let's do this. So I feel like I was a fighter from the beginning, and I was able to pull that out that was in me earlier on than maybe others. But I urge everyone to dig deep and try to get it out of them, because we all have it in us.
Yeah. And I think, you had a natural ability for it. And I think, although my mum, was really keen to give me this positive outlook, I think I maybe had a slightly natural ability for it as well. But for people that aren't used to being positive and using optimism, it is a muscle that you can flex and build up. And you don't just go into the gym once and come out looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You have to keep going, and the more you practice it, the better it gets. And I do believe that positivity attracts positivity, as does negativity attract negativity. So thank you so much. Are there any last words you'd like to say, or shall I wrap up?
I'm just so grateful to be a part of your movement. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story. I really want to get it out there to others, to help others. There's no reason for me to go through all this if something good can't come out of it. So my goal is to really inspire others, empower them, and to make sure that they know that they can overcome all of their life's uninvited challenges. So thank you for helping me share my story.
Oh, thank you for letting me share your story. I really appreciate it. And I 100% know that you will be helping someone, at least one person, probably a lot more than you will ever know, by sharing your story. So thank you so much for giving up your time this morning. I really, really appreciate it. If you
Thank you,
like
Polly.
this video, thank you. If you like this video, please do hit the like and share button and tell anybody who you think may benefit from hearing Carrie's story. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. If you search @Be Glad Movement, you should be able to find us. Please do join in and comment and make sure you share so that other people can see this too. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you so much. Awesome.